True love emerging after one night, a man's life changed forever by an accident, gaslighting, or the ultimate nightmare? All these can only mean one thing. We're comparing Open Your Eyes and Vanilla Sky on this episode of Retro versus Remake.
I'm Reggie Parker.
And I'm Dan Bulick. Welcome to another episode of Retro versus Remake, the podcast where we discuss films and their remakes. Join us as we explore the question, should the remake exist? Today's films are Open Your Eyes and Vanilla Sky. So let's get right into it. Open Your Eyes, made in 1997, starring Eduardo Noriega, Penelope Cruz, Fele Martinez, Najwa Nimiri, Chet Lira, and Gerard Berry. Directed by Alejandro Amenabar. Screenplay by Alejandro Amenabar and Mateo Gil. Music by Alejandro Amenabar and Mariano Marin. Vanilla Sky 2001, starring Tom Cruise, Penelope Cruz again, Jason Lee, Cameron Diaz, Kurt Russell, Noah Taylor, and there's a little cameo there by Michael Shannon, which I didn't notice before. Directed by Cameron Crowe, screenplay by Cameron Crowe, and music by Nancy Wilson. Okay, so this is an interesting one because this is, I think, the first remake, or I think this is the first episode of the show where we have somebody starring in the same role in both films. So this will be an interesting discussion. But what are your first experiences with either film, Reggie?
Absolutely. First experience with these films is this episode. I'd never watched either movie before the discussion that we're going to have today. To your point just now, I think it is interesting that we have someone doing a recurring character. In The Longest Yard, there was an actor that came back. Well, honestly, two, actually. When we go back and look at The Longest Yard remake, they're not really playing the same role.
No.
This is very unique, and I think this may be one of the only times where we see someone play the exact same role in both films.
Yeah. And I have seen both of these films before. I saw Vanilla Sky kind of around the time it came out. I didn't see it in theaters, but my friend had it on DVD, and he let me borrow it. So, and I was just, whoa, what was that? Because I thought it was a crazy film. And then I guess I watched the original years later just because I was curious to see how the remake was different. There you go. All right. Anything else, or should we just get into the synopsis?
Well, I wish someone had told me what I was getting into.
Oh.
I'm glad that you'd seen them because we're going to get into it, obviously from the synopsis, but from the beginning I was like, okay, this is an insane movie. And the whole time I'm watching the original, I'm like, well, I got to see Tom Cruise take on this subject matter. So I guess it was good that I was surprised. I had no expectations going in, and I guess my expectations were exceeded because I was not expecting what I...
What did you think it was? Did you think it was just like a romantic movie or something?
I guess I just, when you look at the titles, when you look at sort of the marketing, I don't know. I just saw there's Tom Cruise and there's the sky behind him. And I'm like, all right, what's this about? And like you see some of the people that are in it, and I didn't know if it was a thriller. I didn't know if it was a romance. I just knew it was a movie with Tom Cruise, which is maybe why I never saw it before.
All right, so let's try to clear the air of any confusion. Let's go over the synopsis here. It's a little lengthy. It's probably the longest one I've written because there's so many crazy things happening. Also, none of the names are the same except for Penelope Cruz's character, Sophia. So just bear with me as I try to get through this. The protagonist has it made. He's the wealthy, carefree head of a corporation. He's young, good-looking, and gets all the girls. He has a party where his friend brings a girl, Sophia. He is immediately attracted to her, despite the fact that she came with his friend. The protagonist and Sophia flirt in private while the party is still going on. Meanwhile, a side girl the protagonist has been sleeping with is also at the party. She wants to be with the protagonist, but he doesn't want to be in a relationship with her. Eventually, the protagonist and Sophia leave the party to go to her place, where true love blossoms. They don't sleep together, but Sophia agrees to see the protagonist again. As he's leaving her place, the side girl approaches in her car. She offers to sleep with him again, no strings attached. He accepts and goes in the car with her. On the ride to her place, she goes crazy with jealousy and crashes the car. The crash kills her instantly and seriously injures the protagonist. We actually learn that none of this is happening now. Now the protagonist is in a jail cell, wearing a mask, telling this story to a doctor. The protagonist is in jail for murder, and the doctor is trying to find some info on someone called Ellie. After the protagonist wakes up from the car accident, his face is severely disfigured. Surgeons can do nothing to fix it. The protagonist tries to get back with Sophia, and she agrees to go out with him. They meet at a club with his best friend acting as chaperone. The protagonist gets drunk, annoys Sophia and his friend, and is left alone on the streets to pass out. When the protagonist wakes up, Sophia is there and willing to give the relationship a try. Things start to turn around for the protagonist, as not only does his relationship with Sophia get stronger, but the surgeons are able to fix his face. Things all seem well when suddenly Sophia goes missing, and in her place is the side girl who is supposed to be dead. She claims that she is Sophia. The protagonist then goes to jail for beating Sophia while proclaiming that that's not her. The protagonist then meets a man at a bar who claims that things aren't quite as they seem, and the protagonist has more control over everything than he realizes. After that bizarre encounter, the protagonist goes back to Sophia's place and she has returned. They make love, and in the middle, Sophia turns into the side girl. Confused out of his mind, the protagonist kills her. He flees, and then his face is disfigured again. All caught up on the story in the jail cell, the protagonist finally learns who Ellie is. It's not a person, but a corporation. Life Extension, or LE. They go to LE and they learn about cryo-freezing and a lucid dream package. When you are frozen, you can dream about whatever you want. The protagonist realizes he's done this, but his dream is now a nightmare. He runs away and finally encounters tech support. Everything is explained to him. He never saw Sophia again after that drunk night, and he's been in cryo-freeze for 150 years. Everything since waking up on that street with Sophia has been fake. He is then told that he can wake up and get his face fixed or remain in the dream. He decides to wake up, but says goodbye to Sophia one last time. He then jumps off the roof, the screen goes black, and we hear a woman say, "Open your eyes." Okay, did I lose anybody there?
You probably lost a few people, and I don't envy you having to read that.
I didn't. It was pretty rough to read, write, and whatever. But that's the story. And if anybody listening to this has not seen either of these movies, do yourself
Stop now and watch them.
Yeah, because it's not going to make any sense what we're talking about, because it's pretty confusing.
This is the one time where I would say this is required watching before listening to the podcast.
Absolutely. And like I said, none of the names are the same except for Sophia's, but a lot of the plot is the same. That's how I was able to really get into details there. So where do you want to start with this comparison, Reggie?
I mean, the most obvious thing, we'll get into character work. We should talk about our protagonist. That takes us to Caesar versus David. I don't know, you have that basically more or less the same opening where you're introduced to these characters, the way that they're acting, looking at themselves in the mirror, the cars that they're driving. It's very obvious that you're talking about two wealthy people here that I don't know if you're going to be able to tell that they're narcissists, but you can see that they care about their appearance.
Well, Caesar's actually not driving a fancy car. He's driving some old Volkswagen Beetle, and his friend even calls him out on it. He's like, "You have all this money. Why are you driving this car?"
That's a good point, actually. You're right. I think these movies just start blending together so much. No, you're right.
But they are both narcissists. They're both like very self-involved and kind of in their own worlds and pretty selfish and don't really care too much about other people.
Yeah. I think the remake tries to make that more apparent. He spends a little bit more time in the mirror. Like you said, the car is significantly fancier in the remake versus the original. Tom Cruise lets you know very early on what he cares about, and it's money and himself. You make a good point, and we're going to get into this a little bit, about Paleo in the first film and him sort of ribbing into Caesar a little bit. I think you get a little bit more of that dynamic in that original film. And, we'll get into the Paleo character, but before really diving into that, I think that it feels a little bit more natural to me when those actors are interacting with each other. The movie feels, probably because we're talking about like a Hollywood budget versus a different type of film, the movie feels a little bit smaller and more personal to me in the original than in the remake. And I think that that sort of flavors my feelings about Caesar versus David. I don't know if you have that same opinion.
I guess I could sort of see that. I think what also kind of helps is the location, right? The original takes place in Madrid, Spain. The remake takes place in New York, New York. And, I don't know too much about Madrid,
No,
right?
yeah,
Or like how much money it costs to live there. But I know if you got that luxury apartment in New York overlooking Central Park, you are rolling in a lot of money. So
yeah,
that definitely helps
it
feel
makes
bigger.
for sure. And both opening sequences have that sort of your protagonist driving along and the streets are more or less empty.
Hmm.
And like you said, I don't know a lot about Madrid. I took in the fact that the character was confused by why there wasn't more traffic. But when you're looking at New York and you're
Yeah.
looking at Times Square, it's like Times Square empty at any time. That that's insane because
Yeah.
that city's it never sleeps.
And
It's a city.
that was shot on location. That's not special effects or anything. They actually shut down Times Square to
Wow.
do that. Yeah, it was a Sunday morning when they guess would have the least amount of traffic, but
Sure.
it's still impressive to shoot anything in Times Square and get rid of all the people.
This was impressive. I didn't know that that was a practical effect. I thought that they would have had to have used some sort of CGI or something like that. But that's actually very impressive. When you talk about New York versus Madrid, in the difference in the two films, you see David's wealth much more obviously
Yeah.
in the remake versus Caesar's wealth, which is more not implied, but it's said. You know, they're
Hmm.
like he has money.
Yeah.
Like this guy's a publisher in New York City for like a major magazine, and that comes into play, and it makes him his cockiness makes a lot of sense in the remake
Hmm.
because he's like not just a rich guy, he's ultra wealthy.
Yeah.
In the original, there's some ambiguity there. It's like okay, he's rich, and the surgery he's looking for seems expensive, but I know he's rich, but I don't see the exact same type of wealth that we're talking about where we're like Tom Cruise could end up on like Time magazine as like person of the year.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what helps it, like you were saying, kind of feel a little more personal because Caesar's wealth isn't out on display. And like you said, we never really see him do any work. Like in the remake, you see David go to his place of business. You see the other owners of the company there, and you see him like just working with his assistant Tibbs and everything. And you see his wealth all around him. And it's almost like in the original, the it doesn't really matter too much that he's wealthy. He could almost just be a regular dude that's good looking.
Nah, yeah,
Um, yeah,
yeah. I got more of a sort of playboy vibe based off of his looks versus wealth. It's like it helps that he's got money.
right.
That guy seemed to me to be, um, everyone's talking about how attractive he is and stuff like that. I'm not getting the exact same read off of Tom Cruise. Like, sure, he's a good looking guy, but it didn't seem like people were like, oh my God, he's so handsome. It seems like he's so rich,
Yeah,
which
it's
can
definitely.
translate to the same thing, apparently.
I mean, it's still Tom Cruise in early 2000s,
Oh, yeah.
So it's not an ugly guy.
No, no, not by any stretch. And it's fascinating that the extra exposition that you're seeing, where you're right, he's interacting with Tibbs, he's interacting with people in his office. He's supposed to pick the font, and he, he's kind of like fucking off from his responsibilities in a way that a rascal with all the people around him. And maybe it's because we get a chance to see him interact with more people than you get to see Caesar interact with, which again leads back to sort of my take that that movie feels a little bit more intimate because there's just less players in the film and the interpersonal relationships come into play a bit. But Tom Cruise, don't get me wrong, I think it's interesting. I think he's doing a phenomenal job of playing the role, but the role is much bigger and the
Yeah.
stakes are much higher. Which, before getting too deep into like, for instance, the partners versus the board, like that interplay is much different between the two films. The partners are never seen
Yeah.
in the film, whereas the board is like right there from the beginning.
It goes back to me saying like it's almost like it doesn't really matter that he's wealthy in the first film because all that stuff doesn't really come into play. It's sort of hearsay. It's like maybe they're against me, but they don't really play on it as much as the remake does. Like maybe it is the seven dwarves that are out to get David and they're gaslighting him.
Sure. Well, that's it's interesting you say that because those things don't come into play and they're not seen. I think part of what the original gets away with more with the character is this mystery. There's not a lot that we know about him, and when
Hmm.
things start happening to him, okay, like I like I is you could even start asking like, is he actually rich? Is he, like there's a lot of mystery about this character, whereas Tom Cruise, everything's sort of out on display. So when things start to get wacky, as they were, there's kind of more of a backdrop, and the exposition takes a lot of the mystery out. So it's a little bit harder to start making that disconnect of what's real and what's not when it feels like early on a lot of what's happening is very much real. And that feels a little bit more grounded in substance, whereas the original, okay, it's a guy, his buddy's girl. He's at his apartment. He's got this chick he's been sleeping with, but like, yeah, who is he? Who is this guy? Like, you don't have that out in your face the entire film. And I think it tonally makes the two films feel a little bit different, which sort of affects, for me at least, kind of the mystery or this thing that they're trying to unravel.
I don't know. I kind of like in the remake because you see the wealth and everything, and having his business play more of an important role, acting as like kind of a red herring more than it does
Yeah,
in the original. Because like when I first saw it, I was just like I like I said I'd seen the remake first, so there was a big part of me that thought, yeah, maybe these guys are, getting together and trying to gaslight him and just like totally just ruin his life. So I liked that in the remake.
I agree too that I do like that because it's very plausible. Like the idea that he's 51% owner of the business. These guys thought that they were going to basically take the reins. And when you look at the character building, he's been sort of entitled since he was a kid. Like he's like skating around in the building, and like someone makes an offhand comment like he's going to inherit the whole thing.
Did you catch that, audience?
Wink, wink. Like, no, I actually do agree with you that his job and the board is laid out there because it makes the tension make a lot of sense. So it's not just this mystery group that you've never seen. Like, are these partners real or anything?
Right.
I like the background. The wealth makes more sense. His own personal issues make more sense because his entire life he's had to deal with this board or, the pressures of being the CEO.
Well, the pressures of being his father's son.
That too, which is a great dynamic that gets added there. So the character is far more fleshed out. It really does help with that character. The David or Caesar, however you want, character is fleshed out, and I think the remake is very strong in that department. We'll get into this as we go through the discussion, but I think we lose some of his interplay with the other characters, maybe because the movie's a little bit busier than the first film. But I think you're right. I think that overall, I would say it's a plus. I agree with you that it's a plus to flesh out the character because we know a little bit more about him. I found the original hard to watch at times because he isn't a very fleshed out character, and his one character trait seems to be narcissism. I mean, he was just like, oh, it's my best friend's girl. I don't care. Like, that's really all I know about him. That he doesn't care about like screwing over his best friend to hook up with some chick he met offhand, like 15 minutes in. Not even 15 minutes. It's like, oh, saw a girl, she's hot. Get out of the way, playo. Like,
Even like earlier in the day, he's like, "Talk, man, I can't get girls like you can." He's like, "Oh well, I'm gonna steal another one from you later today." So
yeah, without really diving into Paleo, because I'm sure we'll talk about that too. I just found Paleo to be more. He just seemed like he was having a tougher time than the Jason Lee best friend. Like Paleo seemed to. I'm
have
trying to think of
have
the
more
word.
of a chip on his shoulder, maybe.
Jason Lee has had a bit of a chip because like he's also fleshed out because he's an author. So like we know what he does. I don't know what Paleo does.
No,
I just know that like he's he's friends with a rich guy, and he thinks he's ugly, and he doesn't think he gets any girls. So like, it felt like even shittier for Caesar to take the girl because his friends confiding in him. He's like, man, you got all the luck with ladies, and I never do. It was like Jason Lee. I didn't feel like he was like, I can't get girls. He's just like, oh, well, clearly I've got no shot if you're in the room,
Right.
which to me is a different dynamic. And again, to me, Caesar he just seems like such a he's just such a dick, dude. Like, yeah, I found it hard to get behind him. Is basically what I'm saying,
Yeah, I could totally see that.
which plays into the way they both handle the accident. Caesar gives up. he, he gives up. Like
Yeah.
the one character trait we know about him isn't a character trait; is that he's handsome. And when he loses that, he's like, life's not worth living. And like, there's a bit of me that's like, come on, buddy. There's got to be more to you than that. Don't give up, I guess. Whereas like Tom Cruise, yeah, he's it affects him greatly, but there's something slightly noble about him trying.
Yeah.
He becomes a better person after this.
Yeah,
See,
he actually does work. He says he found strength he never knew he had, and he's like ready to take on the world pretty much in the remake. And he's like a little more disfigured in the remake too, because not only is his face messed up, but he kind of has like this weird, something wrong with his spine, and his arms is like
yeah,
destroyed too.
yeah. I think the yes, he's more disfigured. I think the makeup is a little bit more reasonable in the remake.
Yeah, I mean, we can get into that now. Yeah, when he's disfigured in the remake, it still kind of looks like Tom Cruise. When he's disfigured in the original, I don't know. It's like he just bought like a Quasimodo mask and put it on or something. I know it's Hollywood budget versus this
Sure.
Spanish production, but yeah, it's like wow.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're right. Like, yes, he is more disfigured, but he does look more like Tom Cruise,
Yeah,
which leads me to kind of believe his struggle a little bit more. It's like, all right, it's the same guy, and like, yeah, it sucks, but I appreciate the fact that he finds inner strength
yeah.
through this.
He didn't just give up. It's, oh well, life's over because my looks are gone. It's not like I have wealth or anything.
Right. Which makes me believe him more when he is able to sort of get back with Sophia. I believe it more
Yeah.
because there were steps, there was like months of like work that led him to get his confidence back in a way that sure his face is disfigured, but he didn't seem to dwell on it as hard, which then is kind of a double-edged sword because when the latex mask feels less necessary later in the film. I get it, I guess, because of what happened to him and why he's in jail or the psych or basically why he's committed. But Tom Cruise's turn and his arc from a big problem to like being better makes some of the plot lines from the original feel a little less. I don't know, like it make a little bit less sense, but still acceptable. I get why he's wearing a mask.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally get that because, like we said, Caesar, it seems like he's given up on life and he's kind of got nothing going for him at that point. So it makes sense that
Right.
he would do the freezing, the cryogenic freezing, and go to the dream. While as Tom Cruise, like we said, his life is actually kind of getting better in some aspects. So it's less reason for him to undergo the freezing process. It's like he found the strength, this new take on life, so to speak.
Sure.
And he almost could have just kept going. He didn't really have to undergo the freezing process and go to this dream world. So yeah, it does sort of hurt his motivation for needing to do that because he did kind of move on from it in the remake. But yeah, like you said, it doesn't ruin it. It's not like, well, I don't believe it at all now because he's
It's just I believe it less, and given his profession actually being like a media guy, I'm like, man, that's actually like kind of a badass story, the rich playboy who like he figured it out, like his face is messed up, like I could still see that guy going on talk shows. I could see that guy doing like editorial articles and being like, this is what happened to me. I could actually see him, even despite his disfigurement, I could still see him hooking up with hot chicks because
Yeah.
like he's the rich guy that like found the heart of gold or something like that. I think it may have helped him.
Yeah, yeah, it could be this like inspirational figure for people who've gone through the same thing.
Yeah,
You could totally take life in a new direction with this. But
yeah.
the Caesar just seemed like, well, fuck, it's over.
Which again, the sort of inciting incident going into being committed makes more sense for that character, but again, it makes more sense for also bad reasons. Again, that's another double-edged sword. You're such a narcissistic dick that like you couldn't handle not being
Right.
handsome, and it led you to do terrible things. Not very endearing, and honestly, I wish he was a little bit less shallow of a character because it was hard to sort of get up for the story at times watching the original film. Whereas the remake, I don't want to gloss over this because I think I might be glossing over the fact that as interesting and fleshed out as the character is, it's insane. Tom Cruise is like he is lean, and this is the most Tom Cruise he's ever been in a film.
Says it's one of
As
his
far as
favorite roles,
I
if not
believe
his
it, man.
favorite. Yeah.
It seemed like he was having a lot of fun, which also, again, from a motivation standpoint, kind of hurts the film compared to the original, where it's like the original is like, it's over, I suck, I'm ready to kill myself. Tom Cruise is like, woo, I'm dancing in the psych ward, man. He's cracking jokes, even though he's like accused of murder. Like he seems to be like to me, this feels like Tom Cruise jumping on the couch.
Yeah. Well, we're very close to that at this point in time. So
Well, that makes sense because like I'm just like this dude is there. He's right on that edge
yeah,
of
he's
like
right on the edge of it. But going back to your point, I guess I could see sort of what you're talking about. Like the remake, they fleshed him out a little bit more, and they gave him some more stuff to do, and they gave you reasons to sort of root for him,
yeah,
which is good. As an audience member watching it, because you need a reason to sort of cheer for the character, but it does hurt the story. I guess the motivations for the story, as like we talked about before. So even though Caesar's a dick, it works more with the story because narcissism would sort of drive somebody to do what he did more than like sort of Tom Cruise. It seems like he's moved on from just being a
yeah,
narcissist.
yeah. It's like if you watch him independently, you're probably not gonna. It's not gonna come on your radar. But if you have the backdrop of the original film, it's like, well, this one makes more sense than that one. But it's not like we mentioned. It's not like a deal breaker.
Yeah.
It's just like, well, adding some of this stuff, which is overall a positive in my opinion, and I think you said that as well. It does sort of weaken some of the other storylines, but I think it's a decent enough trade-off that if you really want to split hairs, I can definitely see how you can complain about it. But like I would say, I would rather have the character I know more about,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and the
something to root
character,
for.
yeah, because I mean a lot of the time I spent watching the original, um, because I knew we were going to be watching both films. I was like, how does Tom Cruise tackle this? That was the question that I asked a lot more than being sort of invested in the character because there wasn't really much there for me to go off.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. And just going back to like Tom Cruise's David being a little nicer, like even when he's talking to Tibbs about taking control of the company, Tibbs is like, "You gotta start playing dirty, David." And then it's like, "No, I'm just a nice, good-looking guy. No, I can't do that." So
Yeah,
he's really not that big of a dick. I mean, he does steal Sophia still, and still a bit of a narcissist, but he's
I,
not as big
I
as a dick as he could be.
I agree, and I think I guess we can start kind of going to some of the other characters from here, but the Sophia snag, as it were, like that stealing the guy's girl doesn't feel as shitty in the remake to me. It's obviously still a dick move. It's your
Hmm.
best friend, and he brought this girl to a party. But again, because there's not as much of that banter back and forth about you're handsome, I'm not. Like again, Jason Lee, we know what he does. Maybe they say what Playo does, but I really don't know what he does.
I don't think they do.
So it's like you've got Paleo who's just blah, you know, like he's just his again his character trait is I'm your friend,
Yep.
you know, and I think I'm an uggo, whereas like Jason Lee, they both you know they snap back and forth, and Jason Lee gets from what I can tell like he hooks up with women, he just not when Tom Cruise is around.
Yeah.
But I think that's built in when you're hanging out with a billionaire playboy. You know, like I think that it's probably a mutually sort of beneficial relationship for him. So it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I might not get this girl, but I'm still hanging out with the rich guy. There's hot actresses and Olympians around. So like, I'll for lack of a more politically correct terms, like the sloppy seconds or like the the breadcrumbs. Like he's doing okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of alluded to in the remake too, because early in the movie they're talking about Julie Gianni, Cameron Diaz's character, in the car, and he's like, "Man, I would love to get with her." And then later at the birthday party, you see him kind of, going in. Now that David's moved on to Sophia, now it's time for Brian to play a little bit with the leftovers.
You do see that. You do see that.
So he's not doing too bad in the remake.
Which to me, it's like, all right, yeah, he's going after his friend's girl, but like, it seemed more like par for the course, and it didn't feel as malicious. Whereas like in the other film, you're almost immediately like that scene is almost immediately following him, sort of bearing his soul to his best friend. It's like, it's not working out for me, and then, like the dream girl line gets thrown out there. I don't believe the dream girl line as much from Jason Lee. You know, like I just don't like, because he is talking, like you say, he is talking to Julie. He's working on his book. Like he seems to be occupied with other things. Whereas again, Paleo, this is it, man. Like,
this is all he's got.
This chick's pretty hot, man. Like, could you let me work a little bit, buddy?
I think part what also helps is Jason Lee's reaction, as opposed to Paleo's reaction. Like you could see, it's like in the original, it's almost like in The Simpsons. It's like you could see the exact moment his heart breaks right here. But in the remake, Jason Lee's Brian just like smiling, like, Jesus, stop flirting already? He's like, come on. It's like it's happened before, it's happening again. Like I can't believe this shit. But oh well, it's my buddy. It's what he does. Yeah.
Which again, I think Jason Lee, I like the casting from the sense of personality.
Yeah. Jason Lee's fun.
He's fun. He's a fun guy to watch. Again, even when things are going bad, I think that's part of his appeal to like, even when things are going bad, he's like, whatever.
He's like, the sweet ain't so sweet without the bitter, man. So he like takes on like the negative shit. He's like, yeah, I love this. So when shit's good, I'm really going to appreciate it. Unlike you, who said everything good. It's like he's got these weird ways of spinning his life just to not look miserable around his friend who has everything.
Which again, I think is a major difference between the two films. Tom Cruise is able to handle his problems in a reasonable way. Jason Lee is able to handle his problems in a reasonable way. And I think as you're sort of talking, the word that's sort of coming to mind for me in the first film is melancholy. Like when things are bad, these characters just embrace it. It's dark. It's raining. Yeah, I loved her. I met her for 20 minutes, but that was it, man. That was the one girl that was going to like change my life. And in the remake, it's like, I'm rich. You're an author. Like, whatever, man. Which again, as an audience, cool. Thank you for giving me something to work with. But again, if we're going one-to-one on the films, the motivations and some of the themes, the thematic nature of the film, a little bit of the not depth, but like a little bit of the weight is gone.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It can affect how you are interacting with the mystery. I think I'm okay with that if you're going to give me interesting characters. Like you mentioned Julie Gianni, like, fuck, that's a fun character. like Cameron Diaz really like she ran with that role and she was great, you know?
Yeah, and especially her turn in the car, like all of a sudden just going batshit
Mm,
crazy. It was like,
mm.
whoa, she went nuts here.
Like I don't have any of the quotes offhand, but like she's talking about like I slept together 4
Yeah,
times.
she's like, she swallowed his cum. That means
Yeah,
something. I was like,
yes, that.
okay, okay.
I remember I was my wife was like working on something on her laptop, and I was watching it on the TV, and she was like, "Geez," I'm like, yeah. I
Yeah.
like it. It's fun.
So I
I
think
don't
what
think.
we're getting at here is the remake so far. It's sort of sacrificing, like you said, the weight or importance of some of these plot points in order to sort of have a little more fun with these characters and to make them just more interesting overall. You know, which is good as an audience member because, like you said, you're giving us something to work with.
Yeah,
Um, and it does take away a little bit, but it's like you said, though. I think the good outweighs the bad. While it's taking away a little bit, it gives us more in the end.
yeah. I think if you're the type of person that is like all about the art, man, like if you're like a film studies guy,
Like my
then you're probably
brother-in-law.
yeah. You probably hate this shit. You're probably like, oh, like, here comes Hollywood, ruining the big art. Like, honestly, like I think the storyline is confusing, which I guess can be construed as compelling, but the characters in the original are very, very shallow.
Yeah.
So I get that there's themes and you can question the big picture, which both films tries to do, and I guess those questions feel more big for those characters in the original film. But like, I mean, we're talking about a dude who like my face got fucked up and now I don't want to live. And it's like I can't work with this guy. Like, I'll take the fact that a character like that makes more sense in that scenario. I'll take the fact that we lose a little bit of that for I swallowed your cum on the drug. Like I'll take like that's crazy. There's like all this nutty stuff happening that I'm perfectly okay with because both films are crazy, so you might as well just be crazy. Like, I kind of liked it.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree, man. I liked it too. Like, I didn't even really think about it too much until you brought up all those points. But yeah, I gravitate more towards the interesting characters with a little bit of depth more than I do, I guess, overall compelling story. What's the story matter if I don't really care about the characters, you know?
yeah, I think that I guess you can't underestimate that star power, like the ability for Tom Cruise
Yeah.
to, in a good way, chew up so much of the scenery, and like he takes all the oxygen out of the room. I think that that can sort of hurt the big themes because you're looking at this guy more than you're thinking about what's the movie trying to say. But fuck it, let's run with it, man. And then you made a great point too that this is around the time that we're jumping on couches, so we're right in this peak. This is a moment in time where we get to see Tom Cruise being, like I said earlier, as Tom Cruisey as he could possibly be. This, like I said, I've never seen the film, but after seeing it, I'm like, wow, this is the movie he was born to play.
Well,
Uh,
I don't want to get too off track here, but he's the reason the remake got made. He had seen the original and
mhm.
immediately was like, I need to get this movie made. And he was going to star in it if he's going to get it made. So he's the one that got it going, and he found the part that was perfect for him. And yeah, it's pretty good. It's a pretty good part for him.
I mean, like when I'm watching the original and I'm looking at sort of Caesar's just demeanor and like what he looks like, I'm like, yeah, he kind of looks like Tom Cruise. And like he's kind of got like they have similar-ish features. I'm like, I could see. I think the casting's good here, but I didn't know that Tom Cruise casted himself. I didn't know, like, he's just like sitting at home with like his private like DVD collection. He's like, they're pretty good. For that to be the story, because clearly the budget was serious.
Yeah.
Like this was not a low budget film.
Oh yeah, we're
at
talking
all.
about shutting down Times Square. I can't do that. Can you do that, Reggie?
I can't do that. And I mean, at the time, and I guess we'll talk about her next. But like Penelope Cruz, Cameron Diaz, Jason Lee, maybe not as much, but like still, you gotta break out the checkbook for some of these people.
Yeah.
For Tom Cruise to effectively make a phone call to a producer somewhere, and then you get a whole ass movie, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Again, the artsy fartsy types would say that maybe some of the messaging is lost in the translation, but I don't care. Speaking about lost in translations, Sophia.
Sophia,
Let-
portrayed by
let's-
Penelope Cruz and Penelope Cruz.
yeah,
Where do you want to
I,
start with her?
one film's in Spanish and English. No, I I felt the character was deeper in the original.
Okay.
It kind of in an inverse way, whereas like in general the characters feel like they're getting upgraded in this film. I think some of the changes in the remake sort of downplay her character.
Okay.
Um, Again, I think Open Your Eyes or Abre los Ojos is effectively an art film when you really break it down. And it's heavy handed, but her character is, damn, she's a mime. She's a mime, you
She's
know?
an
Like
actress.
an actress.
And that might just be like a street gig she's doing.
Sure, but again, these characters aren't fleshed out. So, as far as I know, she's a mime.
Right.
And this could be, we've talked about this before with films, subtitles and reading things versus hearing
Mm-hmm.
the words out loud. And like maybe I'm making inferences from what I think I'm reading and what I think I'm seeing. She just feels a little bit more natural, mysterious, which I think adds to the film, the original, which I think mystery gets the big upgrade in the original and it's downplayed in the remake. But like, again, you don't know much about her, so it makes sense when Caesar is like he's kind of obsessed with her because he's trying to figure out what's going on with her, and it feels more personal. There's her cat, there's her little apartment. Those moments felt a little bit realer to me than in the remake. I think that unfortunately part of it is because I just say her English isn't that great. It doesn't feel smooth and natural, the interactions. It feels like they're trying to communicate across cultures, which they
Mm-hmm.
are.
Right.
You know, a little bit easier to see two people from the same background, same culture, getting along with each other versus Penelope Cruz, who again, it's the same character, but it's not.
Right.
It's not.
I can see what you're saying. Even though, she's speaking English, but she definitely has a pretty thick accent. This is pretty early Penelope Cruz. This might be
Yeah.
one of her first major roles. And I could see, like, how is some rich playboy from New York gonna sort of be enamored with this girl who's, I don't want to say, like, poor English, but she has this pretty thick accent that, like,
Yeah.
might be not as endearing to someone with that status. So I could see what you're saying, though.
I mean, like, especially in this remake, he's the type of guy that I could see sort of jet setting. Like I said, there's like women snowboarder, like Olympians in his house. Like, yes, in the original film, we know he's a playboy and he's a bit of a womanizer, but like, it's on full display in the remake. People are flying in from like the Alps and other places, and like he's met all these different types of women. It takes a lot for you to believe that just because she's hot, which she is, and she's got a great personality. Like, I'm not saying she doesn't. She wouldn't have to be so out of this world for that type of guy to be like, this is the one.
Right.
Whereas in the original, the stakes are lower. It's like he's rich, but
Exactly. We don't know how rich. We don't know how exactly which international women he's getting or whatever.
right. So like when a stunning woman comes into his apartment and they're interacting, I get that. Tom Cruise, I mean, for lack of a better word, I'm not trying to be the dick here, but like, you think it's kind of a little bit more of like sport for him. I get that he might like her, but like, I never really got the vibe that this was the girl of his dreams. I didn't feel that the same way I felt that in the original.
Yeah. I could totally see where you're coming from. And I think part of it, problem with the remake, is that he's not only just trying to get with Sophia, but he's trying to not get with Cameron Diaz at the same time. So, not to knock the side girl Nuria in the original, but like Penelope Cruz was significantly better looking than her. While you go Cameron
Yeah,
Diaz versus Penelope Cruz, they're kind of equal.
yeah,
So, and it almost seemed like, I mean, it did. He did get along with Julie Gianni pretty well in the remake, as opposed to the Nuria in the original, where he didn't didn't seem to like
yeah.
her at all. But he
Wh-
definitely seemed to like Cameron Diaz. So yeah, I see what you're saying. Like this girl, this Sophia who comes along, she there has to be something incredibly special about her to make him
Right.
just forget that he has this other beautiful, amazing woman that wants him.
Like we said, I think we still take this as a net positive, but it is for the one-to-one story. It's a weakness. You actually see him interacting with Julie Gianni in the beginning of the film,
Mm-hmm.
which you don't see him interact with Nuria. You
Mm-hmm.
just he's talking to his friend. He's like, "Oh yeah, I hooked up with that girl again." It was like twice. My God, like you never hook up with a woman twice.
Yeah.
You see Cameron Diaz kind of like in him throwing lines
Yeah.
against off each other, interacting really well, and like in a way, especially like when he gets in the car, as opposed to the first film where he's like, okay, I'll get in the car for the sex, I guess,
I guess if I gotta.
if I need to. There's still that vibe and chemistry with him and Julie, so it's like, yeah, I'm trying to get rid of you, but like it would be like anyone in a relationship like that where it's like he's weighing his options. He's like, well, what do I like about her? What do I
Mm-hmm.
don't about the other one? So you could still see them ending up together, even though this other woman's been introduced into the film. He is protesting. He's like, I don't want to hook up with her. I'm trying to get away from her, but like, not really. Like it feels like he's playing both sides as best as he can, which makes sense for that type of character. Like why not? Like no one's asking him to get locked down.
Yeah.
I guess really Julie's biggest character flaw for him is that she seems to want more than just the hookups, which is very apparent in the car ride. You know? But yeah, like I said, like and that's really taking like accent or English out of it. Like it's really not even that per se. It's just that, like we were mentioning, I would have to see why this girl,
Mm-hmm.
and I, I mean, I could argue that Cameron Diaz is more forceful in the film and has more like, you know, character and pizzazz than what we're seeing from Sophia in general. Like, I also think that is weird. This is an offshoot, but I think it's weird that Tom Cruise has doors with peepholes inside of
Yes, that was weird. I wasn't when I first saw that. I thought like, wait, did he leave his apartment and he has another apartment? No, that's another door in his apartment that has a peephole.
Yes.
Strange, strange.
Yeah. I will blame that on the set designer, but uh,
He had to look at her for some reason, I guess.
maybe there's a reason for it.
Yeah. So it might not even be so much. Well, I guess it's a little bit Penelope Cruz's portrayal in the remake, but I think it's just his relationship with Julie Gianni seems almost like it should work. Like on paper, it looks like
Yeah.
they look happy together. He never looks like upset when he's with her. You don't exactly
Right.
know why he doesn't want a relationship with her. He never says anything negative about her. But like in the original, Caesar's like, "Don't leave messages on my machine because it pisses me off." He's like immediately just like he hates this woman. You don't know
Yeah.
like why are you even calling her. But like, yeah, you kind of like Cameron Diaz in the remake, and you do need like Penelope Cruz does need to kind of have that it factor to make us forget that Cameron
Right.
Diaz is even there. And yeah, she maybe just misses the mark a little bit.
Yeah, like you said, not like you said before, not to shit on like the Nuria character, but like when Penelope Cruz is introduced in that film compared to everybody else,
Yeah.
she is stunning.
Yes.
Like there is no comparison out there, which I think, besides her being a great actress, uh, that's one of the reasons was one of the hottest things in Hollywood for so long because people saw her and like, holy shit, that's an attractive woman. You got to compete with Cameron Diaz, who had her own big viral moments. Like she was America's sweetheart to an extent.
Yeah.
Like we all remember the Charlie's Angels scene with the Underoos and stuff like that. Like Cameron Diaz is hot, man. And in a different film, you could almost see this being like I could see the rom com where Caesar's trying to get rid of Julie and he has a tryst with this other girl, but then they come back together because they have that thing, you know. Like they seem to have that thing a little bit more than Sophia in this. Like I we're seeing the same scenes, but when you start adding some of these characters and you start adding some of this backdrop, I'm not getting the same vibe, man.
Yeah.
So, not really a knock on her.
No.
Well, she just there's just less. I mean, it's not less that she's doing. It's just there's more going on. So, I don't buy it as much in the remake.
Yeah. So I agree with a lot of that stuff. They did kind of like I guess expand on her character a little bit more in the remake. I sort of, even though we're still saying that it's not as strong in certain aspects of it, just because
Sure.
it's Cameron Diaz. They kind of showed more of Sophia not in the dream sequence that made me believe that she really did love David,
That's
as
fair.
opposed to the original where you don't really know if Sophia felt exactly the same way as Caesar did. You get even like early in the film, like after their first night meeting, like you just get a shot of like Penelope Cruz, like just like all giddy in her apartment, just like so happy. And then you get her again at the end of the film when everything's explained to David, and then she like showed up at the memorial service, and she's like heartbroken because she really did fall in love with David. So she was. I know it's kind of like cheesy, like of course she loved him just like he loved her, but I kind of like that in the remake, that she was really hurting, and that the two of them probably could have worked it out if he didn't undergo cryo freezing and kill himself and shit.
I think you make a good point. Once you start getting away from the Julie relationship, you're right. As you're getting later into the film, they interact more, like you mentioned, because he does still have the will to live. They start to kind of make a life together that you don't get in that original film. So you're absolutely right. In the original film, he loves Sophia because he says he does, and she loves him because she says she does. But like you're right that we get to see that more in the remake. So it is a much more believable love story in that sense that he picks himself back up and he's starting to make a life, and she's helping him along in that journey. That's what people that like each other would do. And also, I guess there's a slight difference in the reaction to the disfigurement between the two films. So we should talk about that.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So I'll just set it up here. In the original, he's just driving and randomly sees this mime, and he can tell it's Sophia, and he's just sort of stares at her for hours in the rain.
Yes.
And then they talk. As opposed to the remake, where he kind of shows up in her ballet rehearsal or class or whatever, and he's a little charming. He's he's like, finally a good hair day. I did the Tom Cruise disfigured face. So it's not as bitter or sad in the remake as it is in the original.
I agree, and she's kind of pissed. She's like, "Where have you been? like where's the phone calls?" And which again leads to the fact that like believe that these two people like each other. Tom Cruise, you can forgive him because he took some time for himself. That's understandable to get his shit together. I could see a woman being like, okay, I wanted you around, but you weren't because obviously this is a big major moment in your life. Whereas he's really pushy in the original. Caesar's very, well, I guess you don't want to see me now. And it's like, well, geez, man. Like,
first of all, we just met that one night. Okay. It's not like we've been going out for years. And
right.
Now you're coming at me strong here with that face that looks like a mask.
Nah, totally like a mask. But it's like, it's kind of fucked up because, he implies a lot of his problems. He's like, well, it must be because I'm ugly now that you want to talk to me. It's like, well, just because you had kind of a decent night when you guys were drinking doesn't mean she really even was going to hang out with you again. You're just assuming because you hook up with everybody.
Yeah.
It's much more forceful. Like
he almost guilts her into the date.
totally guilt trips her.
In the original, he's just like, well, you then go out with me then if you don't feel that way. Then he like walks away, and she's like, fine, I'll go out with you. As opposed to the remake where he's like, you want to go out? She's like, yeah, let's do this. Let's pick it up where we left off. She's like all about it in the remake. So again, just showing me that she really does care for him in the remake, as opposed to the original, where she's like, I don't know, we had one night, but you're ugly now. I don't know.
Again, the strength of the remake is these characters aren't beholden to these very simple character traits. There's more to them. So when he's like, well, I guess you're not gonna see me because I'm ugly, and it's like, well, man, fuck. No, I don't want to see you because you're like, you came to my job.
You're staring at me in the rain. You could talk. You know I can't, motherfucker, but you could say something.
Yeah. She has, like you said, more of that Quasimodo reaction. Like she treats him more like a monster in the original film. Like she's taken aback by him often, which again, it makes more sense that Paleo is brought on the date because he's like, look, this guy's creeping me out. Could you please like stick around? And based on what we see in the film, her instincts are absolutely right.
Yeah.
Like this guy is unhinged and he might hurt you. And you feel that. Again, it makes more sense for the story that they're telling that she's like completely taken aback by him, and that it causes a lot of his reactions. Like, I'm going to wear the mask. I'm going to, like, I can't be seen. Whereas in the remake, you know, he's kind of wearing the mask, felt like more like a goof than like he needed it.
Yeah. It didn't make as much sense to me. Like we said, she sort of was accepting of him in the remake. So it didn't make sense that he needed to wear it. I didn't get this so much that he was wearing his goof. I got it. He was wearing his goof later when he's drunk, but I don't know why he's initially wearing it to the club if she already had seen him and sort of seemed happy to see him, as opposed to the original where she's like, "Your butt ugly. Can you do something about that? Oh, great, a mask. Great."
I guess like he interacted with people. I guess maybe at that point he's still hiding his face from the board, but I think that's
true.
Given the nature of his job, given the nature of how he fit into sort of high society, I would be hard pressed to think that in 2001, sort of billionaire, sort of playboy that got into a horrific car accident in New York and was like a socialite would be able to hide his face from Page Six for that long. Right. You know, like I think that maybe he was trying to protect himself on that front. Again, I'm just implying that it really has nothing to do with the movie. He seemed to be okay with being outside with a screwed up face, and it didn't seem like they still had the same scene where it's like, "Oh, fix your face, man," which is crazy in both films. But it didn't seem like he needed it. Yeah. But whatever. It's just not one of those times like, "Oh, he didn't need it," but whatever. Like it doesn't. Yeah. It's not a big deal either way.
Yeah, it goes back to that thing where it's. I guess because the original gives us less with these characters, that's sort of stronger for the story that he has this mask, and while it's not as necessary in the remake, it still works. But I like the character more, so I'll go with it more. Sure. It just kind of talking about Sophia again. When he gets drunk, he has that he sort of reenacts the first conversation they had. He's like, "Excuse me, miss, there's a woman here." In the original, he does it, and she's like terrified. Yeah, she's like, "What the fuck are you doing? Please, you're really scaring me." In the remake, she starts playing along, which it sort of reinforces that this Sophia in the remake really does care about David as opposed to the original Sophia.
Yeah, I mean, more or less, when you're watching the original film, he loses his humanity when he loses his face. Mm-hmm. She doesn't treat him the same. She's actually afraid of him, not just because of how he's acting, but because of how he looks. So it does play into his fears. Mm-hmm. I think he's making it worse. But you could make the argument that it's kind of, from his perspective, this is how people are going to treat him. I mean, you're seeing it on film, but like this, again, is a type of film with the unreliable narrator, as it were, because there is some mystery and things happening that aren't happening, or maybe they are. You can make the argument that this is him reading into this a little bit, but she is terrified of him because he's acting like a terrifying person. I wouldn't want to be around that guy. Yeah, in the remake, Tom Cruise, you're right. He never really loses the charm.
Yeah. Even when he's drunk, like I said, she was playing along with him when he's
Yeah.
sort of drunk. So which kind of weakens sort of that turn that happens that night at the club where she's like
I was about
running
to say.
away, and then his friend Brian wants to leave him. It's like, well, you guys were kind of having fun. I don't. Where did it
Mhm.
turn into a bad night for you guys, where you just want to abandon this guy who's clearly acting, getting drunk, and doing this cry for help, and he kind of could use both of you right now, but you're
Yeah.
both kind of just leaving him. So that was weaker. I mean, I still bought it because nobody
Yeah.
likes a
Sure.
drunk like that, but yeah, it was just what I thought about it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree that the motivation, like you said, a little bit weaker, but it's still believable.
Hmm.
It's fine. Which makes there's that turn, but then the big turn. I guess we can start talking about this. The big turn that sort of leads to some of the violence that we see in the two films. Much more like you see the ramp up in the original film to that you don't quite see in the remake. Like he's freaking out because he's seeing things that maybe aren't there or are there. In the original, this guy seems like he could be violent right there in the club. So when he becomes violent and you get to actually see that on screen in that movie, very much different than the remake, which I think it has that same sort of sequence, but it feels like more almost like a jump cut. It's like, all right, we're at this part of the film now because we're supposed to be, as opposed to that little ramp up of like this guy is unhinged right now and could be violent. Whereas Tom Cruise, I thought he was handling it a little bit better until the moment where he thinks he's seeing Julie.
I don't think in the remake he actually gets as violent as he does in the
No,
original.
not at all.
Yeah,
Not at
you actually see him hit, I guess, Naria in the original, but you never see him hit Julie. He even says he never did that when he's shown pictures of her, like all her face all beaten up.
all. Right.
So he never really gets violent, as far as we know, as an audience member. I mean, he does sort of bound her, but he never, we never see the physical violence up until the
Yeah.
murder. But you do see a lot of the physical violence from Caesar in the original.
Sure. I took the violence in the photo at face value. We'll just put it.
What do you mean?
I just instead of being like, well, maybe it happened or didn't happen. I just, for my viewing, I accepted that he did something violent to her
Oh,
because showing him photos.
I,
And I
I,
think
I saw it as like, wait, I didn't do that. I really didn't do that because I believed him when he said I didn't do that to her.
that,
Yeah, like this is shit's happening and he can't explain it. So I just went with that.
that's
That's how I
that,
interpreted it.
I mean, I think that it's the type of film where, yeah, sure, sure. I'm like, I wouldn't strongly argue in
Hmm.
either direction, to be honest, because like it's the type of film where, yeah, maybe.
And
Um,
especially since when you see Julie later, which is pretty much either
that's a good
that
point.
day or later that or the next day, like her face is fine. So I feel like just weird shit's just happening and you can't explain it.
That's actually interesting. Actually, yeah, I think that that's a fair interpretation. I didn't really think about that side of it. I again, maybe it's because it's my first time watching films and sort of viewing them and comparing them. I just took the violence to be like, okay, Hollywood doesn't want to show Tom Cruise hitting a woman. But no, you're right. Like there is that element where like I think in both films though, right? Like in the original, like I don't think you other than
He does hit her. You do see him hit her,
no,
and then
I
she's got like,
mean, no, he definitely hits her, but
yeah,
like, she does. I think she does recover as well in that original film.
she
In a,
might, but I don't know if her. I don't think we had like a mug shot of her all bruised like in the remake. I can't recall if that was
no,
in the
no, I
original.
mean, I think you see like a black eye at some point.
Oh, okay,
But like, it's hard to say. And again, we're splitting hairs at that point
yeah.
anyway. Um, no, you're right. Like the violence is seen
Hmm.
in the original film. The violence may not even exist in the remake, as
Yeah.
you said. So, um, big, big stark difference there that sort of makes a difference until, which again, to your point, actually, in that situation, yeah, you do see him like kill her at the end, but like, again, does he? You
Right,
know, it's like
exactly.
it's that type of film. Good point, man. I didn't really, I didn't key in on that. I just sort of took it as I watched it as a literal scene versus potentially not, potentially
Right.
not real.
Yeah, I believed him when he said he didn't do it, so that's how I interpreted that he didn't really do it. And then maybe it was the Seven Dwarves until I realized what the
Yeah.
ending was.
Speaking of the Seven Dwarves, what do you think about that inclusion?
We kind of touched upon this a little earlier. I liked it.
Mhm.
I know there's kind of the red herring. It's like, what's happening? It's got to be the Seven Dwarves. I like that inclusion. Like I
Yeah,
said, I'd seen the remake first, so when I first watched it, I wasn't sure what was happening, and I totally fell for it. Like, yeah, this is those seven guys in his company just trying to
yeah.
they're gaslighting him. They're making him go crazy, and then they're gonna steal the company from him. So I liked that. I liked the Tibbs character, this guy that was like would fight for David no matter what.
I thought that was a great addition.
Yeah. So I liked all of that, and yeah. So like I said, I watched the original. I was kind of bummed that there wasn't that character, especially the Tibbs character. I was kind of
Yeah.
bummed that there was sort of this loyal friend that was not in the movie.
The cool thing about like that type of loyal friend is for a film like this, it's a grounding character. It's a
Yeah.
character that sort of you can more or less, as again, the movie itself is an unreliable narrator. He seems to be a reliable source of what's actually happening.
Yeah, he
Um,
seems to be like
it's
constant. This is what he is, and nothing's gonna change about this guy. You know where he is exactly the whole time.
right. I thought that was cool. Another sort of character set that we didn't even get into yet, which is we're gonna have to, is a psychiatrist.
Oh yes, we have Antonio versus McCabe. Where should we start with these guys?
Antonio, I can see from your notes that you have almost like a doctor versus a father figure note here,
Mm-hmm.
and Antonio does give me that very personal vibe that he's starting to believe Caesar, even despite like knowing that it doesn't make sense for him to. But he's like, you know what? You've compelled me to believe in you. I like a lot of those Antonio scenes, and I think Antonio actually is so helpful in that film to make anything make sense. You
Yeah,
know,
of
I,
course.
I think if you take him out of the equation, I'm not sure what I'm watching, which leads to a scene that we'll see later where he starts to question his own existence. That's a major moment in the film. It's not there in the remake, or at least not to the same extent. There's not that same breakdown, at least not in the theatrical cut. Kurt Russell, I don't know. For me, I would say this is one of those characters that is a downgrade for me in the remake.
I mean, I guess I could see why you're saying that because he doesn't really add too much to it, except maybe more towards the end. He does talk about his family more, I
Yeah.
think, in the remake. Um, so wait, when you said there's no breakdown at the end of the remake, where were you? Like he doesn't have like this realization that he's not real or something, or
He does, but like, I mean, when you watch Antonio's reaction, he's frantic. You know, he's like absolutely frantic, and I think that McCabe, though it's still a major reveal for him, you're not seeing the same. And maybe a bit of it is melodrama in the original, but like you're not seeing the same exact reaction to
yeah. I think
not.
it's played more for laughs, kind of in the remake, where
Yeah,
he's
no, I can
like,
see that.
I have two daughters, and you know that. What are their names? I'm real. I'm real. I got a big laugh out of that when I first
Yeah,
saw
no,
that.
I found
So
that.
I think, yeah, I think especially the end, McCabe's sort of a little relief, a little comic relief, because you're just
Yeah,
like you've gone through this fucking crazy ass fucking story, and
yeah,
I appreciated having a laugh there. But I guess ultimately they're kind of the same
more or less.
character, other than that. So for me, I didn't really think one was necessarily better than the other. I think they're just kind of the same, except that McCabe's just a little funnier at the end.
Yeah, I can see that. I think that maybe it's the actor in this particular situation. I think that for me, Antonio is a much more grounding figure, and I also think that when you see that last sequence, it's much more involved in the original with the shooting and
Yeah.
some of the other things that are happening. So I guess what I mean by his character by the end, it's a bit of a emotional roller coaster for that character that you don't see for McCabe. McCabe's just like, like you said, I'm real. Like it is funny. Trust me, it is funny. But when I'm looking at Antonio, I mean, he's gone from he got him into Ellie. He has this crazy reveal. They run outside. There's like a shootout. He protects him in the shootout, like tries to keep him alive, which in the context of the dream world per se is actually a character design. Like he's actually helping sort of the host, as it were, the dream host. And then in the end, when he's realizing that he doesn't have his daughters, I mean, the guy's like in tears, like he's breaking down, and he's like, "I am real. Like this is all like crazy. This is bullshit." It's just the actor, I think, gets to do a little bit more in the scene, but you could also make the argument that it's very over dramatic and over
Yeah,
the top.
it's a
Well,
little
so
heavy.
I can see that.
Yeah, you had sort of mentioned the shootout, which does not exist in the remake. Did you think the remake needed that shootout,
Not at
or were
all.
you okay with? Yeah, okay.
Not at all. Too much. Two different films.
Yeah,
Maybe about the same thing, but they are two different films. I was doing some research, and I guess they had filmed that
yeah.
or something like that.
Hmm.
And you know what? You don't need it.
I think it's
Yeah.
a good cut too. You already kind of figuring out that this isn't real, this is the dream, and I
Mhm.
just think it would have. It's already a longer film, the remake, 2 hours and 15 minutes would have
Yeah.
made it even longer. And it's like, come on, let's just get to it already. Just tell us that this is a dream. Just give us the official. What, did it freeze? Okay. Just give us, just tell us
Yeah.
that this is really a dream. Don't drag it out any longer because we're already here. We're so close. Why are you having this action sequence? So I could see the remake sort of hurting if it included that shootout. So I'm pretty glad that they cut it.
If if that was there, Tom Cruise and everything, I just think it would have fallen into that wacky territory.
Yeah.
And I don't think that the film needed that. I think they did a good job with some of the additions, like the video that they're watching, Tilda Swinton.
Yeah.
Um,
Till this went, and there
you
you
know,
go.
I think that they do enough at LE to explain that it's a dream sequence that you don't need. Why would you need? Why would you need that?
Yeah.
Why would you need a shootout? Like everything freezes. There's a tech support, and like same thing. Like whether or not you thought you died or didn't, you still realize that you're in a dream. So yeah, it's a smart cut. You don't need it.
Cool.
But I will say it pushed Antonio over the top for me versus McCabe
Hmm.
because I think he got to do a little bit more and show
Right.
his how he was conflicting with this realization. Kurt Russell, like I said, fits the movie, fits the vibe. Like, oh yeah, I'm real. That is funny. That is funny. But if we're edging out those two actors, which at the end of the day is kind of inconsequential anyway, my money's behind Antonio in this particular scenario.
Sounds good. Where do you want to go from here? I feel like have we missed any characters? Anybody that was included or not included or
No, I mean any other characters would have been pretty auxiliary. Like they just weren't. You got your main guys. You got your protagonists. You got your Caesars and your Davids. You got the side piece, as there were, the Honorias and your Julias, Sophia, and we talked about sort of the differences there in the best friend. And I guess we can talk about the psychiatrist, which we just did. So like you really don't have much more other than I guess the cop, which happens to be Michael Shannon in the.
in the smallest role?
Oh, absolutely. I like that. I was like, oh shit, it's Michael Shannon.
Yeah.
But like, other than that, there's nothing there for him. But I mean, at the end of the day, the sort of what matters is Caesar and David,
Hmm.
and what matters is what's going on in their lives. Like, none of this, to a certain point, is real, and you get to see how their minds start to kind of tear apart
Hmm.
from this realization. The motivation makes more sense in the original, but like we mentioned, so what? Because the motivation is I'm a dick. Like I want to freeze myself because maybe in 2245 someone could fix my face. And it's like you probably should have just at some point just accepted that this is what you look like now. You got a boatload of money. I'm sure you could figure things out, even looking the way you do, which at least Tom Cruise's character took a stab at it, you know?
Yeah. Do you want to maybe talk about the lucid dreams itself? Because it's sort of different in the remake. A little bit. They sort of touch upon at the end what influences a lot of the things in his dream. They never
Sure.
really go into that in the original. Yeah. So in the remake, a lot of what makes up the lucid dream is sort of stuff from Tom Cruise or David's life. Like the art was made up
Yeah.
from the Monet sky or Vanilla Sky painting, and like a lot of the characters, like the McCabe
Like,
characters,
movie.
based off of what's that guy's name from To Kill a Mockingbird?
Oh, Atticus Finch.
Yeah, Atticus Finch. It's built off of him. Even Sophia's personality is based on a movie character. What'd you think about all that stuff?
I think that is a good addition. I think that when you're making a film in the 2000s, that pop culture and its influence on our mind is a perfectly fine subject matter to dwell on. It adds substance to the lucid dreams to an extent, but ultimately doesn't change much. It's almost not a throwaway, but it's like, oh, by the way, this was based off of some pop culture. So again, from a viewer standpoint, you may be able to infer and read some things into it, but I don't think that it's a major departure. It's just kind of an interesting aside to me, at least.
I liked the inclusion of it, and I think it maybe gives David's character maybe a little more depth, that he
Mhm.
wasn't just like about anything. He's like, this is kind of what I like, and this is what I want. So you get to know a little bit more about him and what makes him tick. So
Yeah.
I thought it was a cool little sort of
Well,
side note about the movie.
to that point, when you're talking about depth for that character, it fits in line because this is what raised him. His father didn't,
Yeah,
you know.
exactly.
So like that is a nice little bow that you can put at the end of the movie. That like this is the result of an absentee father and being put in a situation, and how trauma affected the mind of this person, and this is the reaction that he had when. I mean, there's a little bit of the science fiction in it with crowd freezing, but like it's very much based on a human sort of a idea of like nature versus nurture.
Yeah, good point. Good point there. I don't know if you want to talk about anything else. I was thinking maybe a little bit about the ending, slightly different in the remake. How we got to see sort of a PS scene of like, this is what happened to the people in your life after you died. What did you think about the inclusion of that in the remake?
Again, I like that they flesh out the other characters. I like that they took the time to build these characters out. Uh, I just think of it as modern film. Again, let's put a bow on everything. Like,
Yeah.
thank you, thank you for indulging us for this runtime. We, to me, it felt like we respect your time, and here's something that you can leave with these characters, and I appreciate it. Kind of like I like that Jason Lee and Sophia, like we get more there. I'm glad that they did it.
Yeah, I'm in the same camp. It definitely felt like, well, here's what the characters are, and let's wrap it up nicely, a nice little package for you. But I liked it. I very
Yeah,
much liked it. Um, like I said, I like that you see Sophia like all like sad at the funeral. That scene that gets me choked up personally. That little scene. So yeah, as Hollywood as it might be to include that, I like it. And like you said, we had to go on this crazy ride, so it's nice to get some closure for other characters too.
yeah, yeah. I think like when you look at the original, it feels like the writer and the directors, it's their vision. You know, I don't think that the same sort of consideration of who's going to be watching the film is in play there because I don't think that they looked at it like a big Hollywood budget film. It was like this is my maybe probably like a passion project.
Hmm.
Whereas in the remake, look, it, I'm glad you let me do this art piece as Tom Cruise, but like we gotta, it's a blockbuster film. He's a star. He's got to get butts in the seat, and he respects the source material enough while also respecting the audience that he's
Yeah.
hoping to get enough. And I don't think there's anything negative with wrapping it up the way they did.
Nope. Not at all. Um,
I don't know
let's.
if you, I saw you had a note about music. I don't know if you wanted to talk music. I don't have much on
I
it.
I don't really have too much. I guess just a couple things. I like the soundtrack in the remake a lot.
I do like the soundtrack.
I liked it when I first saw it, and then watching it again, I was just like, yeah, man, I like that. Those music. And the other thing is sort of the way it was edited. Sometimes the music it
Mhm.
definitely helped with the crazy vibe going on. There's a lot of weird cuts, especially the one scene where he's in bed with Sophia slash Julie. Like the music is just kind of this weird collage of noise. Everything's off kilter. Like you don't know what the hell is happening. So I thought that was
Sure.
pretty cool in the remake. Other than that, I didn't really have too many things to say about the music.
Again, my wife was around during some of the filming, and certain songs would come on, and she'd be singing along to them and stuff. So they were recognizable songs that also fit what you're seeing on screen. So again, back to the point of pop culture, they use pop culture in
Yeah,
the film in a way that you don't get in the original, and it's not beating you over the head. It's there and it fits.
yeah.
So I think the remake does a good job with its song choice.
It fits really well, and it kind of comes all together at the very end when you realize that how much pop culture has influenced the journey we've been on anyway. So it's as
Yeah,
much as it might be like kind of marketing, like selling stuff,
yeah.
but it works with the plot. They do figure out a way to make it work, not just to sell all these songs and everything.
No, absolutely. And I mean, the little pop culture montage at the end is lovely. I think
Oh, that's great. I love it.
it's very well done.
I think we've talked about everything there is to talk about with these two films, Reggie. There's only one more thing to talk about. Should this remake exist?
Yeah, I struggled. I probably should have spaced out the films a little bit for myself because I struggled with the original elements of it. With, as I said, the protagonist is a dick. So it was hard for me to get behind him, and at times I got bored because of the shallow motivation. The film was perfectly fine, so I had no problem with watching it, other than those minor gripes. But when the remake came, I was like, all right, well, really, what? As I was watching the original, I was like, how's Tom Cruise going to take on this character? And that was what I was watching to see, and I love what he did with the character. He made it his own. They modernized it. They made it bigger than you saw in the original. The scope of the film was much bigger. Some of the thematic elements of the story are lost um, as a result of making it bigger and sort of including more backstory for the characters. But overall, I mean, not a problem at all. Like you get to see some major star power with this storyline, and like you said, the pop culture references at the end make it all sort of make more sense as to why this character is seeing what he's seeing. So for me, I think the remake is actually a phenomenal movie. Little long, so you be prepared for that. But if you know what you're getting into, great film. Glad they made it.
Hmm. Like I said, I had seen the remake before I saw the original, and I loved this movie when I saw it. I almost said that when I was talking about my first experience with it, but I absolutely am so happy this remake exists because I borrowed this movie from my friend Greg, my
Yeah,
former console wars partner. He let me borrow it, and I was just like, dude, this movie's amazing. It was so
yeah,
good. So I was kind of worried going into this comparison because, like I told you before we started, I'm a little biased towards
sure.
the remake, but I'm glad we had this discussion because you really helped me realize why I like it more than the original because they did really flesh out those characters and
Yeah,
make you care about them a little bit more. Maybe sacrifice some of the artful details or some of the plot just
sure.
a little bit. Just we lose a little bit here to gain a lot more here,
Yeah.
which is I'm fine with that. So yeah, if you're gonna watch one of these movies, I recommend watching the remake over the original because I think it's just overall it's just a tighter, better film.
Yeah, I agree. I don't want to outright say I don't like the original, but in a lot of ways I don't. Um, there's some interesting scenes. I think that especially like the mime stuff, the rain. Like there's some interesting shots, and uh, again, the whole story obviously is based off that original film.
Yeah.
So there's your framework. But if you're gonna watch one, watch the remake.
Yeah.
You'll have more fun.
Yeah, you have more fun. I mean, like you had said it before. The star power really just like elevates the movie so much. It might seem like a stupid thing to say, but yeah, it does. There's a reason why certain people are stars because,
Ab-
man, they're fucking a lot more fun to watch.
Absolutely.
So Reggie, what do you think we should do for the next episode?
We've been watching a lot of more artistic films lately. Well, mixed bag, but I think it's time for us to get back into that blockbuster territory. We haven't done that in a while. Um, I'm thinking a good franchise for us would be Tomb Raider.
Oh, Tomb Raider, video game related too. All right, and that could be interesting too because it's not really a remake; it's sort of just a reboot, and that could be some interesting territory for us to cover. So yeah, I'm all about it.
Yeah, I 100% agree because I think we're coming up on the point in Hollywood where we're past the remake. We're rebooting remakes now. Like I've been watching
Yeah.
trailers. I saw a trailer today for another Ghostbusters. They rebooted the reboot.
Yeah. Well, I think I think it might be a sequel to the original Ghostbusters, but not too.
Fair,
Yeah. Yeah. So,
fair. That's one way to interpret it.
but yeah, there's a lot of reboots out there, and I think that's totally fair game for what we're doing with the podcast.
Absolutely. So this will be a little experiment, but there's going to be plenty of opportunity for us to explore
Yeah.
reboots down the line.
Absolutely great. So Tomb Raider it is. Awesome. Okay. Well, I guess we've got nothing less to do but sign out here. So I'm Dan Bulick. You can find us. We have all new social medias, Reggie. We are all over the place. We are on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. It's all Retro versus Remake. So if you want to follow us on any one of those, we're also on YouTube now, Retro versus Remake. So if that's your thing, follow us there. And Spotify too, right?
Yeah, we're on Spotify now.
Sweet. So if you have anything you want to say to us in any of those mediums, absolutely fine. Also, you can just directly contact us through email, retroversusremake@gmail.com. Just one word. Pretty simple, straightforward. Any suggestions, any comments on what you guys think or, what we should do with the channel. We're totally open to any good ideas.
Absolutely. Yeah, if we missed anything, definitely, or if there's even cool trivia you want to point out, it could always come back down the line in another episode. And
Yeah.
eventually, maybe we'll do some of this stuff live.
Yeah, that's definitely where we're going to go, especially with the YouTube channel. We're going to start doing video of us so you could see the faces behind the voices.
See how it gets made.
Cool. All right. I'm Dan Bulick.
And I'm Reggie Parker.
And thanks for listening to another episode of Retro versus Remake.